Good evening, everyone. My name is Tom Bostwick. I am the County Council's Legislative Counsel and Secretary. I basically, I'm their legislative lawyer, but I also kind of run the day-to-day County Council office, the central staff. And we will be, my staff and I will be leading you through, not really leading, but facilitating really you through this redistricting process. This redistricting commission was formed earlier this year pursuant to the county charter. There are 7 of you. There will be 7 of you. There are 6 of you this evening. There will be 7 probably within the next, by Monday night. And so we wanted to have this first meeting as quickly as possible, so we appreciate you all coming and being available really on short notice. I want to introduce the rest of the staff that's going to be supporting you in this endeavor.
Hi, my name is Adam Phillips. I'm the Deputy Legislative Counsel for the County Council. I think the way things are going to probably break down is I am going to be helping with a lot of the day-to-day work. You'll see scheduling emails from me, emails about meeting minutes and things like that. Chris does not have a mic.
Sorry. Sure you do. Come on, Chris. We're equal opportunity.
Okay. I'm Chris Belcastro, no relation to Lisa Belcastro. That was a joke. I am the council administrator.
Anything wrong with that?
No. I'm the council administrator. I assist the council secretary in running the day-to-day operations of the council central staff, part of the hub of the council as a whole. I'm here for any of your technical assistance or any other matters.
Logistics and emotional support.
So Tom, basically she runs everything, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, basically I assist her in running the day-to-day operation of the county council office. I think it probably would be a good idea just preliminarily if you all want to introduce yourselves and just tell everybody. I know you all talked at the work session and the legislative session when you were confirmed, but maybe just for everyone who's on this meeting or for posterity, you might take a few moments to introduce yourselves. Why don't we start in chronological? So Ms. Tate Duffy, why don't you, and you'll need that microphone, yeah.
Okay. Good evening. My name is Ms. Rotonda Tate Duffy. I am a member of the 1st District. I'm happy to be here and to assist in making suggestions to make our county better than what it is.
I'm Lisa Belcastro, sister of Chris Belcastro. Just kidding, no relation. But Lisa Belcastro, resident of Pikesville, really excited to work with you all.
Eric Rockwell from the 3rd District, and for those of you new, welcome. And I think you'll find, as Alan, Ed, and I have had the experience, that working with the staff is really great and they're very supportive. Thank you.
Good evening, John Delana. I'm a resident of Chase, Maryland, which is right near Middle River, if you don't know where Chase is, and representing District 5, nominated by the Councilman Marks. I currently work in emergency management as my 2nd career. I was a special education teacher in Baltimore County for 30 years prior to that, and heavily involved with the volunteer fire service in the county. We worked on consolidating 5, 6 different stations, and that wasn't an easy task. So looking forward to working with everybody, moving the county forward, and getting this job done quickly. Thank you.
I'm Albert Harris, and I represent the 6th Councilmanic District. I'm also a member of the original structure committee. So our job is to try our best to see what we can do to make this a 9 council, as opposed to the 7 that we have. Outside being a former special educator for Baltimore City for 32 years, I'm a Marine, and I believe in getting the job done. Semper Fi.
My name's Edward Kramer. I'm the 7th District. My representative is Todd Crandall. I was on the last committee to go from 7 to 9, and he asked me to come aboard to work on the maps for the redistricting, and I'm looking forward to working with everyone. And I will second what Eric said. The staff here does an excellent job. Telling you, if you need anything, those 3, they'll take care of you.
Thank you all very much. I think at the start I'll say that you, as part of this 7-person commission, you have 3 of you who were on the County Council Structure Review Work Group. That group, I forget, I think there were 9 people on that. 11. They were 11. And they did a lot of work in a relatively short period of time. I think it was formed in mid-November, late November of 23, and made its recommendation by March of 24. So you all are working on a somewhat similar truncated schedule in that you're being formed right now, and you're going to need to have your product completed by mid-June of this year. So it gives you about 5 months, and which is very doable. What's going to happen, though, is, as these gentlemen can attest, we're going to fill you with a lot of information in a very relatively small period of time. We're going to, I wouldn't say bombard you, but we are going to provide you with a lot. Number 1 is what you have in front of you, which is the redistricting manual. This is something that, I'm not saying you have to put it under your pillow, but if you ever are looking for something to read, this will fill the bill. It's really a complete guide to Baltimore County redistricting. It has some historical references. You know, it gives you a pretty good flavor for how we got to where we are since around 2000. And 2000 was a very consequential period too, because that is when the county council finally put together a countywide map that had a majority African-American district in what became District 4. So, you know, starting from there, the redistricting manual gives you a lot of context and a lot of information. It gives you the process, it gives you the history, it also gives you the legal requirements. So if you did nothing else but read that, I think you'd be in a pretty good place. But you're going to need to do more than that. We do have the agenda for tonight, so we're just going to go through the redistricting manual, and we're not going to, you know, get into the weeds on anything this evening, but we just want to kind of give you a little flavor of sort of things to come. Discussion of the training and presentations that we're going to make, talk about our next meetings, public hearing planning, and then whatever questions or discussion you all have. Adam's going to give you a little overview of the redistricting manual and the process, and some of the potential training that we're going to have. Really, it's going to be, you know, demographics, and what the legal requirements, and legal meaning charter and general legal requirements. You know, the redistricting comes down to what the charter mandates, which are compact, contiguous districts with due regard for communities. But also you have to make sure that you are adhering to traditional legal redistricting principles, one of which, and the most important of which, is the Voting Rights Act. We have to comply with that. Obviously, we want to comply with that. So that's what we'll do as you go through this process. We'll also introduce you to, actually, before we get moving again, I have to also point out the people who are really going to be important, and that's the GIS folks. So, and we'll get to the other most important person in a sec.
Hey, it's nice to meet you guys and ladies. Rob Livermore, I'm the Chief of GIS Data and Business Analytics for the county. So I manage a team, but the real work gets done right here.
Right, Rob and I are like the same, and then Adam and Christine are the ones that actually do it.
Hi, everyone. My name is Christine Hensler. I'm the GIS Specialist Lead here with Office of Information Technology. So I'll be your go-to with any mapping software questions that you guys have once we get introduced to that software.
And then, forgive me for my oversight, but we also have the director of the Baltimore County Board of Elections here, if you wouldn't mind saying a little something.
Hi, I'm Rui. I'm the director of the Board of Elections, and I'm just here to help because the less cuts and splits we have, that means the county saves money and the voters aren't confused. So however I can help, just let me know.
Rui's here to make sure that we don't make too many crazy boundaries. Okay, so with that, I think I'm going to hand it over to Adam. He will go over some of what I just talked about in a little bit more detail. But again, I mean, the purpose of tonight is not to bombard you. You're going to get that. But the purpose is just to give you a little taste of what to expect and, you know, go from there. Any questions? Okay.
Okay. So, like Tom said, we're going to basically start with a presentation of the redistricting manual. The first thing to know is why we have a manual in the first place. The county council and it really understood that when they first implemented the redistricting commission, that this process is technical, it's complicated, and there needs to be some policy that remains the same throughout decades of changes, but also is updated as the law changes, as cases get litigated, as technology evolves. So that's really the purpose of this. This is now the third edition, and I've worked hard to make sure that it is completely updated for this specific process. And we're going to get into that in a few minutes, but this process, this 2025 commission is very different from the 2010 and 2020 commissions. But before getting into that, let's just do a 101, what are our redistricting processes step by step? The council has already done the first few steps, which is they must establish the commission by a resolution, nominate and confirm the commission members. The next one is the meat of what you guys are going to be doing, holding public meetings and actually discussing and drafting a map. You also have to have at least 3 public hearings. Given the time frame, 3 is pretty much all we can handle. You then submit a report and recommendations to the council. That report must have a draft, not a draft, a final recommended map and a draft of the redistricting legislation. Now, you guys don't have to worry about drafting that. That is what Tom and I are here for. But the substance of that map, that is what you guys do. And in addition, there's a report that goes over the changes that you guys made from the previous map. It gives the demographic breakdowns of each district. In the previous one, I think we went over quite a bit of public testimony and addressed that in the report. So those are all things that, staff will help you draft, but I want you to be just thinking about as, that's your end product. After you guys submit the report, that's actually all of your job. This process is specifically set up to be a recommendation to the council, meaning it is their ball to take and run with at that point. They have to have, the council has to have a public hearing on your recommendations, and then introduce, consider, and enact a bill to redraw the lines. So that's the step-by-step process. So I want to get into the shortened timeline that we have. There's a very specific reason why we do have a shortened time frame, and that's because of a change to Charter Section 206 in the bill that expanded the council. There was an amendment to that bill that specified that this process must end, meaning the council must adopt the final map by October 1st, 2025. The normal time frame, the deadline for that would be January 31st, 2026. So it shortens this whole process by about 3 months. So accordingly, in order for the council to do their job, you guys have to shorten up your part. So we'll get to a little bit more specific on the time frame later on, but I think now is a good time to tackle the charter requirements. Like Tom said, there's 3 basic charter requirements: compact, contiguous, and with due regard to natural, geographic boundaries and community boundaries. Oh, substantially equal in population. These are stated in the charter, so you must follow them. So must the council. But it's important to recognize these aren't just, we didn't just make them up. These were based on traditional redistricting principles that have been used for decades across the country. Federal and state courts have litigated tons of different reasons for changing boundaries and have found that if you follow these basic and traditional principles, generally your map would be valid. So while these are technically local requirements, they are completely based in what state and federal courts accept. I just want to clarify that so that it's important that we follow them. Okay, so I want to talk about why this 2025 commission is different. We've got a shortened process. We already kind of hit on that. This is a mid-cycle redistricting. I mean, it seems fairly obvious to state, but it's important to say. The census is a snapshot in time. It really occurs, from April of a 10-year, 2010, 2020, till about July of that same year. We are roughly a little less than 5 years removed from that. So the natural question is, well, if we are that far away, is the data still accurate? Well, yes and no. It is what we have to use.
It is in the eyes of the law.
Yeah, by the law, but it's also been found accurate by many state courts, state and federal courts, to use census data throughout the 10 years. So I don't want you to worry about whether we're doing something invalid. We're not, by using the census data. It's also important to note that Maryland has a special requirement that has to do with their adjustment of the data. Essentially, incarcerated persons are incorporated back into county data, to census data, and there is a specific requirement that because Maryland does that, we must use their data for redistricting, full stop. So we don't really have an option under both state and federal law about which data set we must use. But that doesn't mean there aren't other products put out by the Census Bureau that can give you context, that can inform, the process. The best example here is the American Community Survey. That's done about every 3 years, and it's a random sampling of 3.5 million households across the country. And it gives you a lot of the same data or similar data to the census. It updates things like household income, ages and members of households. It's just not as granular as the census. So as we get going, we might kind of blend in for just your context, blend in some of this American community data with census data. That way we're using the correct one by law, but you're also getting a more up-to-date picture.
So the numbers, basically, simply put, the numbers you're going to be using are going to be the same numbers we used when we did this in 2021 and 22. But in terms of how you get to the boundaries you make, so the numbers will have to adhere to those. The numbers, meaning the numbers that we get for each district, will have to adhere to the overall numbers that we give you from the 2020 census. But as you're making decisions or looking at things, this more updated information might guide some of your decision making on how you get to those final numbers or boundaries. So hopefully it'll be helpful. And when Jen Meacham from the Department of Planning gives you the demographic presentation, I think some of her numbers will be informed by that. And also keep in mind, even though this is a mid-cycle, this is going to be valid for 2 election cycles, 2026 and 2030. So this isn't just a stopgap, short-term, relatively short-term, but it's going to have meaning because you're going to go through 2 election cycles before we do it again in 2031 for the 2034 election. So I think that's important to know. You're not just doing a one-off. Your mic.
Mike.
There.
Yes, the question is, in the last time the districts were reconfigured, what sort of number were you using for substantially equal? What was the margin of?
Right. So what the courts have said is, as long as they are, it's what we call the 10 and 5 rule. There can be a 10%, is it percentage or deviation? Yep. It's a deviation of high and low. There can be a 10% overall. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Overall.
And yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, it's a 10% overall deviation between the highest and lowest. But we also, this is more of an internal to try and help us keep to that. We try and denote the 5% as well, so that you, basically it just helps guide your decisions where, if one is 5 below and one is 5 above, that's your max 10%. So
yeah. So yeah, we try to keep it 10 and 5, 10 overall, and 5, between districts.
And again, that's using the 2020 census data. So there's two other ways that this is different than normal redistricting. The first is it's fairly obvious. This is your job is to go to 9 districts, is to create a 9-district map. We've never done that before. So this is not. It will be more complex than simply adjusting boundaries according to changes in population, which is what some places do every 10 years. That's all they try and do. It will be more involved than that. We'll get into, there's going to be a lot more discussion about that later, in later meetings, so I don't want to dwell on that too much. The other one is probably the elephant in the room, which is this process is the first one after the 2021 and 2022 litigation that the county faced. Just to state clearly what actually happened, the county did pass a map. The county was sued for allegations of violating the Voting Rights Act. A district court enjoined that map and told the county to come up with a second map that did one of two things: created a second majority black district or a district that substantially provided an opportunity for the minority population to elect a candidate of their choice. The county produced a map to the court. It was not a second majority black district. It was approximately 40% that the second district was something called a crossover or a coalition district. The court accepted that. And later that day, after she did, we passed that map, and that is the map that is in effect today. I think I can speak for Tom when I say we sincerely hope that this process does not result in a lawsuit. We are going to try and provide you with the best legal advice we can in order to avoid that. But it just needs to be recognized that, you know, we did have that most recent history. So that's pretty much everything I wanted to touch on in the manual.
And one thing I want to touch on that is, so to give context as well, how did you all get here? The council did pass Bill 4724. That was the bill that expanded the council from 7 to 9 members. It also did other things. There were several charter questions in that bill, one of which, but most of those questions were, you know, minor changes that were necessary to implement a logistic way to go from 7 to 9. We needed to change the charter to allow for a redistricting process. We needed to change the charter to say there's going to be 9 instead of 7 members. But one thing that was also done when that bill was introduced and passed was we prepared a map, a 9-person council map. That map was prepared to accompany the bill, and if the bill was passed, and if the voters passed that, approved those changes, then that map would take effect. That map, we believe, is a valid legal map in the sense of checking all of the charter required boxes as well as the federal law requirements for a redistricting map. It has gotten a lot of flack, mostly because of the process or manner in which it was prepared. Be that as it may, that map does exist. It's not like we can pretend it didn't happen. You, however, have no constraints when it comes to that or any other map. That map is there. It's part of the redistricting manual because, again, it's part of what is in place. But you all can utilize it as much or as little as you like. Is it a good potential starting point? Sure. Is it something that you may end up with at the end? Perhaps not. And the only thing really you need to look at it for is, again, as okay, here's a map and we can use it as a starting point, or we can just completely start totally from scratch and come up with 9 districts that are exactly how you collectively want them to be. So don't feel like you are constrained by that map, but on the other hand, use it however helpful it may be. And then as to the redistricting litigation, yes, I mean, it's a little tough sometimes to discuss because the county, at least the council, I think, has felt like it's been on the defensive because it was on the defensive and sued. But in the end, you know, this redistricting litigation, what the council was alleged to have engaged in, I think the allegations were very unfortunate and untrue. But in the end, the council, the court accepted a map that essentially moved District 4, which had about a 71% black population, down to 61%. And it moved the population in District 2 from about 29% black to 41% black. And that is what the litigation resulted in. And that's where we are today. You're going to be questioned, or you're going to be considering what else to do. Is there an opportunity for a third black district? You'll have to decide that yourselves. And again, the goal here for you 7 is to come up with a consensus map. You know, if you get to a point where it becomes necessary and you need to take votes, you'll certainly be able to do that, and the majority will rule. But I think you need to keep in mind one other thing. When the council does its work, it's going to need 5 votes to pass a map. That means there's going to need to be cooperation on the county council in order to enact a bill to adopt a map. So the hope is this commission will engage in the same type of cooperation that the council's going to need to be engaged in. So, you know, whatever map you come up with, if you can come up with a good map that meets the compact, contiguous, substantially equal in population, gives due regard to communities, and potentially has 2 black districts or 3 black districts or 2 black districts and a majority minority district, or however you come up with it, that's going to be your decision. So I don't want you to feel like you're constrained by anything, because you're not.
So are you saying that y'all were, previous to us being established, you're mandated to create an additional black district?
No, actually, in fact, it was just the opposite. The court, when it had to get involved, the county's original map had 1 black district, maintained District 4, and it had a majority minority district. I believe it was in District 1. And the county was sued because it did not, the ACLU and the NAACP and other plaintiffs alleged that unless the county came up with a map that had at least 2 majority black districts, notwithstanding any other districts, that we were violating the Voting Rights Act. And so the county defended itself, and the judge in her order ordered the county to either create 2 majority black districts or one majority black district and a second district that, as Adam said, gave the minority population in that district a meaningful opportunity to select a candidate of their choice. Now, that sounds like a lot of legalese, but it really does have a practical implication. So what the county did was it saw the value, obviously, of increasing the minority and the black population, but it also didn't want to completely compromise the other redistricting principles of compact, contiguous, substantially equal in population, and not to be discounted too much, the importance of communities and keeping them together as much as possible. And this includes all communities. And so the council opted to take essentially the judge's second option, which was maintain District 4 as a strong majority black district, and also create a second district that gave a black candidate a meaningful opportunity, or not a black candidate, but gave the black residents in that district the opportunity to have a real meaningful role in the selection of their candidate. And so by upping the black population from 29% in District 2 to 41% in District 2, it created a much better opportunity for black candidates and black residents in that district to have a candidate of their choice win if they so choose. And so that's what the council did, and that's what that's what the judge approved. I mean, I guess that was a long-winded way of saying what yeah. I just wanted to make sure I was being precise.
There is one point that I know confused some council staff and council members while we were going through it, which is it's not about the race of the candidates. It's about who the minority population chooses. And I don't want to make specific examples, but there are people serving on the council right now who won a majority of black precincts in their district, and they're not black themselves. So that's what it's about. It's about who do the minority populations choose as their candidate, and is that person given a fair shot at actually winning the district, as opposed to being always outvoted by, by a white majority. Yeah.
Can I say something? Mm-hmm. I believe that it has more to do with having option instead of, because if all I have is this, that's what I'm going to pick, outside of having the option, right? So I think that is more of the issue, more so than voting for the specific person, if that makes sense. Just to keep a thought process, because we had a testimony last week that basically stated that the issue is more so having an option.
To interject, one of the things that we came up with in the first council is the one thing we have to remember. We cannot select who's going to run. We cannot tell the voters who to vote for. So the issue now becomes, what is the process for that person to be elected? And if he or she, hate to say it, doesn't have the finances, what are we going to do?
Point though, and understanding what you're coming from, I think one of the things that Judge Grigsby, the district federal judge, recognized is, look, if we up the population to 41% in District 2, you know, if you're a potential black candidate, you say to yourself, you know what, I have a shot in this district, you know, not because it's, you know, 41% black, but because, you know, it's obviously going to help. And so it may encourage someone who might not have otherwise run to run. And I think that's what she wanted us to do, and we did. But I think that's what a lot of this is going to involve. You know, you want to give everybody, a man, woman, black, white, maybe even some other minority, an opportunity to be able to run and have a shot. And I think, as Councilman Patoka has said, there's kind of a perfect, and I don't want to get too far afield from, but there's sort of a perfect storm of, you've got 2 new districts, and, you know, 2 is better than, 9's better than 7 in terms of opportunity for other people to win, because you've got 2 extra seats now. And 2, you've got the public financing option, which will hopefully level the playing field a little bit. And maybe that candidate who was on the fence, but, you know, sees a potentially more competitive district demographically, as well as the opportunity to get some money, they'll roll the dice, and, you know, hopefully that's what we'll come up with. So, Adam, why don't you keep going?
Any other questions on the redistricting manual and just kind of the overview of that? Nope. Okay. So now comes kind of the easier part of this, which is how we're going to train you guys, and how we're going to keep to our schedule. So we've planned 4 basic trainings. The first, which will probably occur first chronologically, is a demographic presentation from Jen Meacham. Jen is going to be our planning department liaison and demographics expert. Like I said at the very beginning, Maryland mandates an adjustment to census data. Well, it's the Department of Planning who does that. So having a planning liaison is really important. The second one is, the second training is going to be on our redistricting software. So we are almost complete our purchase and implementation of the Esri redistricting application. It's a completely web-based redistricting app. So that's why I have asked you about laptops, because we're hoping that you can actually, when we get to this point, bring your own laptops in, and we can actually, have you, use your own computer to go to the application and do some of the training. We're going to, when we get to that point, which is hopefully going to be in February, we're going to have, it's going to be an entire meeting, and we'll have hopefully several members of the GIS here to help us. There's also going to be opportunities for some one-on-one later on if you need it. And I think there's some training directly from Esri. And just as background, Esri is one of the oldest GIS mappers out there. They've been doing this for like 30, 40 years. And as a bonus, the county's main GIS software is Esri. So integrating any custom data sets from the county should be much easier than if we chose some other product. So for example, if you want to look at, if you want to integrate code enforcement data, see if, or the rat eradication program data, or vacancies data. Those are all custom data sets created by our GIS office. It should be very easy for them to integrate that in so that you can see it along with all the other demographics. The third presentation will actually be from Rui. She's going to talk about what she does, what the Board of Elections does. It's something that we haven't touched on yet, but after the council is done with its, once the council passes the map, it's got to go to the Board of Elections, and they have to redraw the precincts. So I think it's really important to have that context of, here's what happens, along the entire process. And then the fourth one is going to be a presentation on legal requirements and compliance with the Voting Rights Act. Tom and I are still working out exactly who and when is a good time for that. We're trying to get, the first two are really the ones that we have a little bit more of a sense of when we can do them. But we're going to keep trying to keep you guys on schedule. And speaking of that schedule, February, in the presentation, I've laid out the timeline of both the council and the commission. I think the important thing for you to know is we've got to be wrapped up by mid-June. And we have to make some tough decisions about how to do our 3 public hearings. So our recommendation is to keep with an aggressive timeline. If you guys are willing, we would like to see you have 3 events in February, 2 meetings, and 1 general public input hearing. The idea is that obviously in February you won't have a product, you won't have some draft map to show anyone, but the public, given the recent history of the expansion and the fact that we are only 5 years from the previous redistricting, I believe that the public's going to have some general pointers that they want to give you before we really get into the weeds of redistricting. So I do think there is some value in giving them the opportunity. It does have a nice bonus of getting 1 public hearing done before, say, May. But that would require you guys to agree to 3 events in February, and I know that's not always the easiest. Beyond the public hearings, though, I also wanted to stress, you guys are, besides the council members, you are the main voices to the community about this process. And to that end, I want you to know that we're going to accept public testimony that is emailed to us. We're going to hopefully accept both virtual and in-person testimony at these public hearings. I have here we have a dedicated email address for the commission. So if there's community members, associations that want to voice their opinion, but can't find the time, we're going to accept it through that email and distribute it to you as soon as we get it.
And it's pretty complicated too. It's councilmanic redistricting at baltimorecountymd.gov.
So just to touch on just a couple of miscellaneous things, because I think we're pretty close to the end here. And then we can actually talk, figure out scheduling. We are in winter, so we have to think about bad weather policies. generally, for the work group that took place this time last year, the way we did it is we will move to a virtual meeting only if the county closes. I'm hoping that doesn't happen. And I think that in-person meetings make a big difference. So I'm hoping that we can kind of keep in person. The second is selection of a commission chair. Obviously not tonight. We don't have our 7th member, but probably sometime in February. And then if you want to hold public hearings in the communities, say, one on the east side, one on the west side, like we did for the work group, the staff needs some suggestions of what you want to see in terms of, those locations.
And for the first one, as Adam said, that one's more of, I think, almost like a intro or general public hearing for you all to gain input from the communities on, kind of generally what they think about redistricting and what your task is at hand. And we think having that one here in person in the council chamber would be a good option for number one. And hopefully, again, if the schedule allows, maybe in mid to maybe late February, like maybe that last week of February, have it here and have it say at either 5 or 6 o'clock. And we would we would have a virtual component to that. So we would encourage people to come in person, but they could also testify online. And then the other two, it would seem to make sense to have one on one side of the county and one on the other side of the county. And schools might not work out very well. I think you may recall from the email I sent everybody, just because they're in session and they have activities, almost every night. So we might need to figure out an alternative site. I think a public library might not be big enough unless particular ones have big rooms. I think someone mentioned the Liberty Road Resource Center, and that might work if it's big enough. But things like that. So if you have anything in mind beyond the chamber, either on one side of the county or the other, please let us know.
If I can just jump in, I think the Randallstown Resource Center for the west side is a great opportunity. It's close to transit. I'm not as familiar with the east side of the county, but if anyone has any suggestions, I think it's important that we consider off a bus line or off of public transit when selecting our sites.
Okay, any questions with any of that? Nope. Okay, now comes the really hard part. Scheduling. I guess, let me throw you guys a question. Would you be willing to do 3 events?
3 events meaning 2
Two, yeah, 2.
one public hearing.
Yeah, two in February.
Yes.
That'd be fine.
Okay.
Anyway.
So for the, okay, well, let's kind of go week by week. The first week, and I've asked you guys through email, to give me dates you were unavailable. I've kind of condensed all of them into what I think are the available dates. It's in your, in the presentation, page 5. I did this in color, and we printed them in black and white. So the darkest shade are the dates that I think are available. That are available, yes. So for that first week in February, I think only February 5th is available. Alternatively, I think maybe the 4th. I think maybe there was one person who could not make that, but this is where you guys got to speak up and tell me if it works.
Personally, I'm going to struggle the first week in February, but I'm open for the last 3 weeks in February. But it sounds like we don't need everyone at every meeting, right? Yeah. We just need a quorum, right? Yeah. Yeah. And everything's recorded, right?
Yeah,
You can watch.
everything is recorded, and you're going to get all the information. Like tomorrow morning, my plan is to send you guys the PDF of the manual and this presentation, so you'll get all the materials.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
The other thing I wanted to add is, so this is a public body, so you are. We need to comply with the Open Meetings Act, the Maryland Open Meetings Act. So every meeting we have will be a public meeting, just like tonight, in person, online, and anybody who wants to come. There's probably not going to be too many times, and you remember maybe from the work group, you always were pretty much talking about things in public, and that's a good thing. If there ever is a situation where either you all have some kind of legal question and you're getting purely legal advice from us, or someone wants to go into a closed session for whatever reason, we can certainly do that. We just need to go through the proper protocol to do that. But again, I don't really foresee it happening too much. When we or whoever does give you the presentation regarding the legalities required in the Voting Rights Act, that's not so much legal advice as it is a presentation of what the legal requirements are. So certainly that'll be a public meeting. So just to give you a heads up, we are going to comply with that. If somebody can't make a meeting and we have 5 or 6 still, we can still move forward.
And just to clarify, the quorum number is 5?
Quorum would be 4.
4, okay. All right, so 4. Do we want to pull up our schedules and maybe go through week by week we probably all won't be able to make every meeting, but we can figure out if we have a quorum for each meeting and then move forward that way. Personally, I'm going to struggle in the first week of February, but do we have 4 people at least that have, I guess the question is, does anyone else have a problem with the first week in February where they're away?
No.
No? All right, so it looks like Adam's identified the 5th. Does the 5th work for everyone here? Yes. All right, it won't work for me, but it looks like we have a quorum for the 5th. So, yeah.
I only have one question about that because, the reason why we want to try to get this as soon as possible is because right now we're missing the member.
Mm-hmm. Right.
That's the number one. We definitely want to get a chairperson. And the only way to do that, we have to have everybody here. And we got to keep in mind that on Tuesdays, council meets.
Yeah.
Right, every other Tuesday.
Right.
And every other Monday. There will be opportunities, but on like the off Tuesday or the off Monday, but probably, Wednesdays seem to be, at least on this for February, kind of mostly the best day, except for this next Wednesday. How about next Wednesday, the 12th, or not next, but how about Wednesday, the 12th?
I was going to suggest we do it the 10th, the 20th, and then 26th.
That works for me. Anyone else? Does that not work for anyone else? Yeah.
Okay. If there's a consensus for that, then we'll book it. Is 5 o'clock okay? Okay. The 26th, I think, is when we'll have the public hearing. So, the 10th, the 20th. Right, not the 12th. So the next meeting will be the 10th, and that'll be a general meeting. The 20th will be a general meeting, and then the 26th will be the public hearing.
Actually, I think we need to switch those last 2.
Oh. Okay.
Because, Rob and Christine? Okay.
Oh, okay.
Could you do the 26th?
Okay, all right, so we'll do the public hearing on the 20th, and then we'll follow up with the general meeting the next week on the 26th. I think the public hearing should probably be at 6, just to give people an opportunity to get here if they do. I mean, is that okay with everyone? Mm-hmm. And then the general meeting will be at 5.
On the 26th?
So the 10th at 5, the 20th is the public hearing at 6, and then the 26th, and we'll send this to you, and the 26th will be another general meeting at 5.
Okay.
All right, that was easier than I thought. Does anyone have any questions or any suggestions, or, if you want to talk about anything?
Well, I do have one comment. And Adam, you said that the last, the June, mid-June, correct?
Yeah.
So I think we need to look at things that we want to finish it end of May, beginning of June, because we're going to have things that are going to happen. So we're not, I can't say what I want to say because it's in public, but so.
County School District, they told their graduations from the middle of May to the first week of June.
So it's, like I said, we want to try to get things completed beforehand. So we're not there with our pants down, per se.
I think I think we can do that.
Because something's going to happen or whatever, some change, let's have majority of our work done so we can tweak whatever we have to at that period there. Yes.
And you're right, and you want to, it's easier to slow down if you're ahead of the game. It's a lot harder to catch up if you're trying to speed things up at the end and catch up. So, which is why we're encouraging, let's get a public hearing, not out of the way, but let's put it in the rearview mirror. So that's one legal requirement that you've fulfilled, but you've also gotten some meaningful input at a relatively early juncture. And then in March, we'll have another public hearing. We may not even have a draft map yet, but we'll have another public hearing. And then, maybe the last public hearing is in early to mid-April. And then you've had 3 public hearings, you've taken care of all that. And then, as we get through the month of April, you'll have developed a map. That map you'll disseminate, if you like, to everyone. And we may not have a public hearing again, or maybe we would. I mean, if you all said, you know what, I think we need to do this again, we'll do it again. But at least you'll have taken care of the legal requirements, and then whatever else you're doing is just to help you all a little further if you need that to get past the finish line. So the more we can do early on, the more you can develop things earlier, quicker, obviously the better. But, we're going to balance that with making sure we do it right. And when I say we, obviously I mean you all. We're just going to be supporting what you're doing.
Well, if no one has any other questions, and if you do, speak up. But if not, I think that's it.
Is everyone all right with adjourning?
Yeah, you guys did a great job. Thank you. Very organized. Yeah. Thank you for all your hard work. Yeah, you did a lot to prepare.